Okay, so hello and welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to talk about films in 2021. I know we've just hit 2022, so it feels like a good time to go back and look at movies that I watched last year that, well, A, I really liked, or B, I thought were awful, and kind of anywhere in between. I'll start by saying this video is completely unprepared. This is something I want to do off the cuff. I just want to talk about the movies. I don't want to kind of prepare too much or, overthink about my review or analysis of a film. I just want to give sort of quick 1-minute reviews of films I've seen, negative, positive, whatever they might fall into. So without any further ado, let's jump straight into the movies. And I'll start with one I have mixed thoughts over. Now, one of the most recent films I watched on this list is a film called The Last Duel by Ridley Scott. What to say about this film without getting too heavy and talking about subjects I don't really want to discuss on my YouTube channel. This film is dark. This film is very, very heavy. If you know what the film is about, you will understand why straight away. All I'll say about this film is that it is a very well-made film and it is a story that is very well told. However, the story that's being told is super fucking harrowing, and realistically, that's going to put a lot of people off. It put me off for a long time. It's the reason I hadn't watched it until I did. Frankly, I find it hard to recommend a film like this. For me, it falls a little bit into kind of almost like the Passion of the Christ style film, where it's like, it may be a well-made film, but it's so hard to watch. And realistically, I'm not sure what we get from it. We're past the point, hopefully in 2021, where these stories have been told many times. Frankly, in my opinion, I think they're actually getting told a little too often. And I don't know what's to be gained by telling this story, really. So whilst it's a very good film, not one that I'd recommend to many people, unless you really want to look at a historical, horrible event and a very detailed look at it. So yeah, The Last Duel, well-made film, goes on the list of I probably wouldn't recommend to watch. Changing tone completely and talking about a film that I would absolutely recommend everyone to watch is a film called Encanto. Now, personally, I love musicals, so this was always likely to be something that I enjoyed, but this film was just magical from start to finish. Excuse the pun if you've seen it, it's about magic. To cut a slightly more complicated story short, the film is about a family who have a house that kind of has superpowers, and essentially they all get a gift, which ends up being their own little kind of miracle or superpower themselves. And the story kicks off with the second youngest child, I think, or one of the younger ones, having not gotten a gift when it was her turn to get one. So the rest of the family all have gifts, she doesn't. And by gifts, I mean superpowers. They can do various things like, hear things a mile away, heal people with a meal, things like that. And she doesn't get a gift, and the film is about essentially her finding out why she's not got a gift and what that means for the family and what her gift might be and if she has one. And I won't get into spoilers, but yeah, it's a very, very fun film. It will surprise no one to say that Lin-Manuel Miranda is absolutely hitting it out of the park at the moment. Off the back of Hamilton, we've gone into In the Heights, which I loved recently, which I might talk about later. And he did the music for Encanto. He's also done the music for things like Moana, or at least been a part of them. And it really shows. The music is absolute top-notch in this film. There are multiple tracks that I listen to on a regular basis. The first track on the soundtrack is like literally stuck in my head and has been for like a month. So yeah, but there's also a really, really good story here. It's a diverse film about a family in Costa Rica, I believe, and that is, again, something we don't see all that often in mainstream films, so it's great to see a different perspective. It's just the kind of film that kids are gonna love, adults should love, and it's got fantastic messages in. Encanto, go watch it. Next, I'm gonna stay with Disney and talk about a film that I was slightly disappointed in. That was Marvel's Black Widow earlier in the year. Now look, at this point, it's a tired tale to say that this film was way overdue and should have come out years ago. Realistically, this film should have slotted into probably Marvel Phase 2, 3 at most. The fact that we're getting it in Phase 4, once Black Widow as a character has already been killed off in Endgame, is frankly atrocious, and there's a lot of behind-the-scenes politics that go into that decision. So when you look past that and you actually start the film, I think everyone's kind of looking for almost a bit of a redemption arc, something to really kind of, post her death, boost her character and give you, more backstory, more kind of detail into what her character really was, which often wasn't that explained in the previous films. And Black Widow does do that, but for me, not in a way that was quite well enough. Now, where I give the film massive praise is the other characters that were brought in. So we've got Florence Pugh's character, David Harbour's character, Rachel Weisz's character. They were all fantastic and I loved them, and they were the best part of this film. But the problem for me was that the actual Black Widow character in this film doesn't really get developed that much. Like, okay, we now know she has a sister and she loved her sister, but it doesn't really go anywhere. And of course it has very little consequence because we know full well that Black Widow dies, a couple of years after this film in the timeline anyway. So frankly, this is a film that, yeah, it just came out too late and it didn't really hit. It might have been a better film if it had come out when it should have. But yeah, Hollywood still doesn't think female movies will sell, or didn't until very recently. So here we are. To name one more Disney film, and I promise I will move away from Disney eventually, a film that I thought I was going to absolutely hate and ended up kind of liking was a film called Free Guy. So for me, I've said to a few people that Ryan Reynolds kind of funny guy shtick is wearing a little thin for me right now. I know it's very popular and I know it might be slightly controversial, but it just kind of feels the same in a lot of films. In the Pikachu film, it was the same. The Deadpool was a law of diminishing returns for me. I thought Deadpool 2 was pretty poor after Deadpool 1 being very good. So when I went into this film, I kind of expected the exact same thing. And he kind of plays the opposite in this film. He actually plays the straight guy. And we have other characters that come in and really play the humor and stuff. And it's just a fun film. There's not much I can say about it, much more than it's very fun. Loads of video game references. The whole film is literally a video game. That's the whole point of the film. And, if you're like me and you're into video games, you're going to get a lot out of that part of it. So, yeah, Free Guy, it's funny. Jodie Comer's great in it. Ryan Reynolds is great in it. There's a few supporting characters which are pretty funny. Taika Waititi shows up and kind of phones it in, as Taika does sometimes now. But it was all fun, and it's a worth watch. If you need a kind of popcorn flick to watch on a Friday night, I'd recommend Free Guy. So finally, moving away from Disney, we have a small little low-budget indie film called Dune. Of course, I kid, this was a huge film with a huge production and cost a hell of a lot of money to make, and obviously is the second time that Dune has been adapted into a film. But for me, this time it was very, very successful. Denis Villeneuve, I hope I'm saying that right, is almost kind of, on a perfect run for films for me. Every single film I've seen of his, I think I've seen most of his work now as well, has been just fantastic. Across different genres, they're not all sci-fi. He did Prisoners, which was, again, harrowing, but really, really good film. So he's kind of, on that line of like hitting no wrong at this point. And Dune is no exception to that rule. Dune is very clearly a part one of a trilogy, and it does maybe suffer a little bit from that. But honestly, this is a 2 3/4 hour film that absolutely flies by, in my opinion. The acting's fantastic. The score is absolutely unbelievable. I know at this point, Hans Zimmer is just on another level, and it's almost redundant to even say he makes good music, but the music in this is just so atmospheric. I can't even listen to it like a soundtrack because it's basically atmosphere most of the time, but when it swells into real music, it is absolutely top tier Hans Zimmer, firing on all cylinders. I really hate it when my computer goes off randomly and runs my shot. Anyway, there really isn't anything negative I could say about this film. The acting's fantastic. As I said, the music's fantastic. The visuals are incredible. I have no idea what's going on in this world because I haven't read the books, and yet you're in from the start. There's no hand-holding, but you also don't need it because it sets up what it needs to set up in a way that's satisfying. And yeah, go see Dune. It's literally incredible. See it on the biggest screen you can. Please don't watch this on a phone. Don't watch any movie on a phone, but definitely don't watch this one on a phone. Watch it somewhere that's got a sound system, turn it up loud, and just switch off for 3 hours almost. This is an incredible film. Now, moving on to a film that actually was low budget and actually probably does class as an indie film. One of my favourite films this year was a film called The Green Knight. This was one of those films that I had no idea what it was about, and I saw a trailer, and a lot of the internet was like, holy shit, that looks incredible. Why does this look so good? Trailers sometimes can be deceiving and they're not always, indicative of the final movie, but in this case, it absolutely was. Similar to Dune, this is just an atmospheric film, incredible visuals, a really, really tight, well-told story. It doesn't drag. It's got loads of random shit going on. You're kind of like, what? But okay, this is cool. Amazing acting. Dev Patel is incredible, as he always is. It's a very differently paced film. It's kind of slow at times and kind of plods along. There's not a lot of action in it and stuff, but it never feels like it needs it. The dialogue scenes are so intense, and the other scenes that aren't action are kind of so well done that you just never feel like you're ever lagging behind anything. Medieval fantasy type thing. Again, no idea what was going on until quite near the end, but just an absolute experience film. Similar to Dune in that regard. Watch it somewhere that you're going to really switch off, turn off all the lights, don't go on your phone and stuff like that. This is one you need to focus on and watch, but incredible film. I would recommend this to anyone who, professes to enjoy films and filmmaking and all that whole perspective. Okay, so I won't waffle on about too many more, but another film that I absolutely loved was No Time to Die, the latest James Bond film. I think it's safe to say that Daniel Craig is now a lot of people's favourite James Bond. I think his films have actually been very up and down. There's been some really good ones. I think Casino Royale was an incredible start. And then you've got films like Quantum of Solace, which are okay, but kind of, drag on a bit and aren't really fantastic. Skyfall, again, huge high point. Spectre, meh, not great. So going into this, it was really a 50-50. Was this going to be another kind of meh end to the series, or was this going to be something incredible? And for me, it falls into the latter category. This was an amazing film and actually way better of a send-off for this James Bond than I ever thought they would or could do. Now, this is one of the few films that I'm going to talk spoilers for, so if you haven't seen James Bond, skip on a minute here. Big spoiler warning, I'm going to ruin the end of the film for you because I feel like I need to talk about this in regards to why I really like this film and kind of what it does so well. Anyway, spoilers. So they made a huge choice at the end of this film, one that I don't think many people saw coming because it's never been done before, and they actually kill off the James Bond character. I remember I was sat in the cinema watching this film and, they get into that end point and it's doing the whole kind of, the scene where the bombs are coming in and he's on the island and he's saying, oh no, I'm going to make sure I shut this facility down. I'm not, and they're kind of playing the whole like, oh, he's not going to get off the island in time. And I was sort of sat there going, okay, good, cool. Like I like the tension, I like the high stakes, but it's James Bond, you know. They don't kill off James Bond. This is not a thing they've ever done. And then it was like the bombs himself were kind of like falling, and he was like at the top, and he had like a broken leg or whatever, and he's like stumbling, and he's making no effort to leave. And I was like, holy shit, like they're actually doing it. Like, okay, fair play, hands up, did not expect that. And obviously that's not the only thing I like about the movie, and also I'll pull away from spoilers now, but I think that decision is just very like, explains why I like this movie, because they took risks. They did things that haven't been done before in James Bond films. You know, there is a family element that we haven't seen before, really. You know, there's long-term characters like the Leia Sadu character that's been in other films that, you know, we kind of have an attachment to and understand. And obviously they started that back with Vesper in the first, in Casino Royale. So just these kind of like longer-term storytelling that James Bond isn't known for, and that Daniel Craig wants to have kind of really started. I don't think any of the old James Bond films really kind of like tied to each other or linked in. And I know that's very popular these days with like serialized stuff like Marvel, but I think it just works really well for James Bond, and it adds levity, and it adds kind of like real depth to these characters, and for me it makes it well better. So yeah, I mean, honestly, the action was incredible. Again, Hans Zimmer absolutely smashing the soundtrack. The acting was really, really good. Like, you know, all the main characters absolutely hit out of the park. Daniel Craig can act the hell out of a scene when he needs to. And I think there was just a lot of negativity going into this with the whole, oh, he's only doing another one for the money and he doesn't really want to be James Bond anymore, and just none of that comes through in the film. It's a really fitting send-off for his James Bond. And yeah, No Time to Die. Like, if you haven't seen it, like, honestly, it's one of the best James Bond films there is, in my opinion. Go see it. Okay, I'm going to talk about one more film because this could go on for ages. It's one of those videos where you sit down and think, oh, I'll talk about a few films, and then you realise that you've seen a lot of films and there's a lot to talk about. But I noticed I haven't really talked about anything that I didn't like particularly, so I'm going to talk about one film that I was excited to watch quite recently, and like really didn't vibe with at all. So the film I'm going to talk about is The French Dispatch by Wes Anderson. So Wes Anderson's a weird one where, having gone to film school, obviously he's one of those guys that you kind of learn a lot about, and you kind of, you know, you're shown as an example of stylistic filmmaking, and you know, all his films kind of look the same, even the ones that are animation, even his older ones, they all have a very similar kind of framing style and composition, that kind of stuff, which is really cool, and like it's really fun to watch, and it's, for someone that's interested in filmmaking, even more so, like it's really kind of fascinating to kind of watch and experience. So going into this film, I was like, okay, well, I've really liked the last couple he's done. I've even gone back and watched some of his older ones, and I really liked them, and your trailers looked really cool. This looked like a fun film. It might have been my mistake for not knowing what this film was and not kind of reading anything about it, but this film is basically like an anthology film. It's in 3 parts, and it's just 3 separate stories that kind of don't link at all. And the setup is that it's like an obituary for this, like the guy who runs the French Dispatch newspaper. And basically these 3 stories are like stories that were printed in the final print. I think that was the premise. Says a lot that I don't even really know because it was that confusing. But yeah, so it's like a weird one where the 3 stories themselves are kind of like, they're fine, like they're okay. I thought the first one with Leia Seydoux and Benicio del Toro, and you know, cool story. And then it moves on to the second one, and I was like, okay, cool. Timothée Chalamet's in this, Frances McDormand's in this, cool. Again, it kind of plods through, and I was like, okay. Moves into the third one, and it kind of just lost me, and I was like, I'm not that interested in what's going on here. The actual third story itself for me was like dramatically less interesting than the first 2, and I was just like, is this going to link? Is this going to tie in? Is this kind of going somewhere? And it kind of doesn't. Like, spoilers again, I guess. The end of the film is just like them at the newspaper after the main guy has died, and it's like they've all kind of like come together to put these stories together and stuff, but like they're not actually linked. The characters aren't actually linked. They just all were a part of this newspaper eventually, and it's like, that isn't a tie. Like, that isn't something that kind of wraps them together and makes it interesting, for me at least. So it kind of just felt like I'd watched 3 short films of varying quality. Again, it's Wes Anderson, so like stylistically there are very interesting choices, and some of that works very well. I actually thought some of that didn't work well here. I thought some of that felt weird and like didn't add anything. Like, there's a whole animated scene with a car chase, and I was like, why? Like, this didn't feel like it needed to be animation, and actually it would have been really cool to see that chase in his visual style. So I was like, I don't get what's going on here. And it's just a weird film where I left kind of thinking like, okay, you know what I mean? I didn't really enjoy that. Kind of sometimes feel like I should enjoy films like that, and then I'm like, but I didn't. So yeah, The French Dispatch, I was really looking forward to it. I've loved his last couple of films, which are all kind of like linear stories, and this for me just missed the mark completely. And it's interesting, it's one of them where I've read some reviews afterwards and seen some different impressions on it and stuff, and it's been very mixed. You know, some people have really enjoyed it and the style and how kind of zany it is, and some people like me have just kind of gone, yeah, like rein it in. You know what I mean? Sometimes filmmakers need reining in just a little bit. Wes Anderson is a great example of someone that's gotten to a point where he can do what he wants. Like, he's not going to get questioned because he's so successful, and that doesn't always work in someone's favor. Like, you know what I mean? Sometimes people need to take it back a step and like, let's make a film that's still actually like a fun film, an interesting film for people to watch. So I don't know. I don't want to knock on him too much. Like, he's made loads of incredible films, and some people would have liked this one, but The French Dispatch, it wasn't for me. So yeah. I know I said that was the last one, but I'm going to really quickly throw in a bonus film, which I just would be remiss if I didn't talk about because I'm just a fucking massive nerd for it. How ridiculous was Spider-Man No Way Home? Look, would this film have been even better if they were like radio silent and no one knew what it was going to be and what it was going to entail and stuff? Yeah, probably. It's a bit of a kind of shame that Disney can't hide stuff better at this point. You know, most of the casting in this, most of the kind of people in it and the stories were leaked. But I think in a weird way, it kind of like raised anticipation more as well. Like, everyone was kind of, or everyone that cares at least, like in my space, was like, you know, looking forward to seeing all these characters back together and stuff. And I just can't believe they paid it off. Like, honestly, people have a go at Disney all the time and Marvel for being serialized and blah, 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 and all this money-making machine. But to take this many elements, like this many different characters from this many different films and this many different, like, cinematic universes, excuse the phrase, and make a film that works, you know, that has interesting characters, that has stakes, that has people you're interested and care about still, like, hats off. Like, honestly, how have they done that? How have they pulled all these people together? You know, spoilers, 3 different Spider-Mans from 3 different unconnected films, pulled them together and made a film that is so emotionally impactful that pays off like 3 different trilogies. Like, it's not even just paying off Tom Holland's series. Like, it actually kind of feels like a payoff for Andrew Garfield's and Tobey Maguire's as well, which is like the best compliment you could give to the film because it's made 2 other franchises feel better. It's completely rejuvenated interest in Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man, like, which is, thank God, because like, have you ever seen someone that was hit so hard by being a great actor in a great character in a shit film? Like, I've rewatched the Amazing Spider-Man films recently, and like, Andrew Garfield and Emma Stone are so good, like, way and above my favourite Spider-Man and, you know, Spider-Man, like, female partner, but like, the films themselves and the rest of the cast, like, meh. So yeah, just like, hats off to the people who made this film. Like, they clearly knew what people wanted. They clearly knew, you know, that they'd get a lot from putting these characters together and having, you know, references and payoffs and stuff, but they managed to do it in a way that didn't feel cheap. It didn't feel like fan service, or not in the kind of shitty way anyway. And also, like, made like the whole audience cry multiple times. You know what I mean? Like, it's impressive. I don't see how any haters can say that that isn't impressive. Like, yeah, fucking go and see Spider-Man if you haven't already. I've just ruined it for you, but like, go and see it still, because like, what a film. In fact, I'm gonna go and see it again. I'm gonna go now. See you later.